Joining us now is Kira Lerner. Kira is a political reporter at thinkprogress.org, and she is at CPAC, which is the annual gathering of conservative activists. Both President Trump and Steve Bannon, along with Reince Priebus, White House Chief of Staff, they are among the people who have addressed the CPAC conference this year. In fact, Trump and Bannon appeared together to represent the two competing, some would say, branches of the Trump administration. So Kira's been there on the spot. She's there now. Kira, first of all, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. Thanks for coming on. And we're coming to the end of this event. What's your overall impression? Crazy, not crazy? What's your big takeaway from this?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that struck me over the course of the last 2 days here is just how different it feels from last year. I mean, of course, last year we were in the heat of our presidential campaign cycle, so things were different. But it's now been a little bit over a month of the Trump presidency. And the attendees at CPAC, who make up what we call the Republican majority, they are embracing Trump wholeheartely, and they are ready to get behind Trump and his team of advisors. Like you said, Steve Bannon spoke here yesterday. And in past years, Bannon has held kind of alternative events outside of CPAC because he was not welcome inside the doors here. But this year, he appeared on stage with Priebus, and they kind of came off as like a buddy comedy duo. And people I spoke with here were surprised by how personable Bannon seemed. They were enthusiastically applauding Trump this morning. And while Trump is definitely not the president of the Republican establishment, it seems like the attendees at CPAC are ready to get behind him and support his presidency.
Well, that's really both interesting and scary. By the way, I love the image of Bannon and Priebus as a buddy movie, as two cops who don't play by the rules or whatever.
Exactly.
But obviously, well, to me anyway, it's all scary stuff. If we look at the big differences that Trump has had and the Trump team has had with the conservative movement, as CPAC has, traditionally represented that movement, I guess the two big differences are white nationalism is not that big a difference, but even more white nationalist than before, I would say, one. And two, there's what Steve Bannon calls economic nationalism, which is a big break from the conservatism of the past because it's an opposition to trade deals like NAFTA and TPP, which conservatives and others like to describe as free trade. It's willingness to spend money on things like stimulus and American manufacturing, at least verbally. The rhetoric says they're willing to spend money. So was there any, did Bannon mention any of this, or did anybody kind of try to reconcile the two, or were those differences just kind of ignored?
Yeah, well, Bannon did talk about how Trump's presidency, one of the main goals is to take on this administrative state and to kind of destroy the system as we know it. And speaking to conservatives here, I think they liked that rhetoric, even though it's maybe not what they would have said last year at the same time. But you mentioned the white nationalist undertones, and it's been interesting to see here at CPAC where conservatives are drawing the line when it comes to white nationalism. And clearly this is an issue that is really hard for them right now, and they can't quite make up their mind. Richard Spencer, who is a prominent white nationalist and who has supported Trump's campaign, he bought a ticket to attend CPAC, and he was here yesterday roaming the halls talking to reporters. And when I spoke with him, he expressed his support for a lot of Trump's policies, his immigration ban, his Muslim ban, and his plans to build the wall. And he talked in pretty detailed language about how he stands behind what Trump is doing from the White House. But then when the CPAC communications team got wind that Richard Spencer was here talking to reporters, they kicked him out of the hotel, and they said that his views are repugnant and they don't represent the Conservative Party. So it's hard to tell where exactly that line is being drawn.
Yeah, especially because as I recall, and you've been covering CPAC now, so maybe you'll remember, but as I recall, at least one speaker there got, whether it was Grover Norquist or somebody else, got hounded because he was insufficiently anti-Muslim. I think maybe he was married to a Middle Eastern woman or something. But it seems to me there's always been that element in this group, but I guess Spencer is just a bridge too far for them.
Exactly. I mean, they have people like Sebastian Gorka signing books and speaking from the stage today, and there were reports today about his anti-Semitic ties in Europe. So, yeah, again, it's maybe the completely overt white nationalism is where they draw the line, but remains to be seen.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And then, of course, one of the big stories of this week coming out of CPAC was Milo, Yiannopoulos. I don't intend to learn how to pronounce his last name, by the way, because I'm counting on his 15 minutes of fame ending very soon. But
exactly.
You have Milo, and apparently Milo's hateful words about Islam were not enough to get him banned. His hateful words about trans people were not enough to get him banned. It took a wholehearted endorsement of child sexual abuse to get him banned. So is that where the line is in this group now, that you have to be in favor of abusing children before you get kicked out?
I mean, I would not be the one to ask, but it is interesting that Milo was given a platform and wrote for Breitbart for years, and Breitbart is an official sponsor of CPAC. And every member of Congress and governor stands up on the main stage to deliver their remarks. They're standing in front of the Breitbart logo. So whether or not Milo is actually here in person, I think it's pretty clear that CPAC can't entirely back itself away from those views.
No, great point, Kira. If he's not there in person, he's there in creepy spirit. You also, Kira Lerner, you interviewed some transgender Republicans. You have a piece up at Think Progress. Transgender Republicans say Trump seriously failed his first LGBT litmus test. I'm interested in, how it's possible, and I don't mean this in an overly harsh way, but I genuinely don't understand how it's possible to be trans and a conservative Republican in this day and age, any more than, frankly, I understand how it's possible to be Muslim and a conservative Republican in this day and age. What was your reaction to these trans Republicans? Did they feel beleaguered? Did they feel conflicted? Did they feel?
Yeah.
What were what was your impression?
Yeah, well, I've heard a lot of people kind of express the same sentiment you just shared since I published that post. That seems kind of like an oxymoron to be a transgender Republican. But these two women I spoke with, both of whom were holding signs and flags outside of the main ballroom of CPAC, both today and yesterday. They've been coming to CPAC for years, at least one of them since before she transitioned to a woman. So these are people who do identify with the Republican Party. They're fiscally and somewhat socially conservative. They said that during the campaign, they thought that Trump did make good inroads with the LGBT community. They referred to the time that he held the flag and the fact that he kept President Obama's LGBT envoy. So they thought, well, maybe we actually will finally have an ally in the Republican Party with Trump. But then, as we saw what happened this week with the memo pulling back President Obama's protections for LGBT students, they were extremely disappointed. And they said while they feel welcome at CPAC, they no longer really feel welcome in the Republican Party. And they're not ready to abandon the party, but they were pretty upset about what happened this week.
Yeah, and that's certainly understandable. And by the way, just to be clear, I certainly understand how one might be trans and economically conservative. The two are completely independent, and socially conservative for that matter. Transgender surgery is permitted, for example, by the Ayatollahs in Iran, who are extremely socially conservative. So it's not that I find those two things incompatible, either social conservatism or economic conservatism and being trans, but just this group, these CPAC folks, seem to me to be so intolerant that I can't see how it could be a hospitable environment. Obviously, I feel for them on a personal level for their sense of disappointment, but do you think before that or without that they would have felt comfortable in this environment? Was there a lot of sort of overt bigotry towards LGBT people there?
Well, one thing they expressed that kind of did strike me is that they had been coming to CPAC for years, and over the course of just the last few years, we've seen how much the public opinion from both conservatives and progressives has changed towards the transgender community. They said that a few years ago at CPAC, speakers on the stage would say blatantly insulting and discriminatory things about trans people and would get cheered by the CPAC audience. And while people here may still feel those views, it's not something that's being cheered from the stage, any derogatory terms about transgender people. So when it comes to, their day-to-day fight to make their concerns more public, they do feel like it's very important for them to be here because they are seeing progress, even if it's slower than on some other issues.
Okay, and that's interesting. And I also wanted to ask you, Kira Lerner, about I didn't attend the conference. You're there. My impression has been, last year there was a lot of anti-Obama talk. There was a lot of anti-Hillary talk, of course. My sense is, but I could be wrong, it could just be the reporting that I'm reading. My sense is that the real adversary this year was Bernie Sanders. Is that true, or is that just the filter I've been exposed to?
Yeah, there's been some Bernie Sanders talk, but if you're talking about the real adversary here at CPAC, I would say that it might be the press. After Trump's speech this morning, there's no question who the enemy is. He said in pretty blatant terms who he feels like he's fighting against. And I think he only brought up Hillary Clinton once, which is pretty good for him, considering how often he still finds a way to bring up the campaign and the debates nowadays. And there was only a lock her up chant at one point during his speech. But a majority of his remarks were about the press and fake news sites, which he defines as any news coverage that's negative towards him. Those are the real enemies to him. But yeah, like you said, there is at least one panel here this week about Bernie Sanders and his offers of free stuff to the American people and how that contradicts with freedom.
Yeah, right. Okay, I won't even dignify that. But one last question then for you, Kira. Since Trump did inflame and has been for a while, but since he really turned up the heat on the press in his speech today, did you feel? Are you wearing a press badge? Did you feel personally uncomfortable or unsafe at any point?
I haven't felt unsafe. There is a pretty big press section here at CPAC. But what's interesting about this event is that the American Conservative Union will credential pretty much anyone who claims that they're a reporter. So from the media section, you see a lot of standing and cheering for Trump's talking points for people who might just be have a conservative Twitter account or something like that. So I haven't seen any overt hostility towards press here, but I've been covering Trump rallies and conservative events for the past few years. And I think you see a little bit more of that when you get out of the DC area and this event is mostly attended by young college students and young conservatives. And I don't think they're the types of people who are being right now.
Well, that's good to know because we want you to be safe out there. But Kira Lerner, political reporter for Think Progress, thanks for the great reporting and thanks for coming on the program.
Yeah, thank you.